The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room buzzed with anticipation as former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi approached the podium. Camera flashes illuminated her confident stride as she adjusted the microphone, her blue blazer a stark contrast against the wood-paneled walls of the historic chamber. Across the room, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett sat composed, her expression unreadable behind a practiced judicial calm. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Bondi began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I come before this committee with evidence that will change everything we thought we knew about Justice Barrett's appointment process." The room fell silent as Bondi reached into her briefcase, pulling out a sealed folder stamped with "Confidential" in bold red letters. "What I'm about to reveal shows a secret arrangement that occurred before Justice Barrett's confirmation, one that she has never disclosed to this committee or to the American people." Justice Barrett's calm exterior cracked slightly, her eyes widening as Bondi opened the folder. Within seconds, the entire committee leaned forward in their chairs, expressions of shock spreading across faces on both sides of the aisle. The chairman frantically reached for his gavel, but it was too late. The revelation had begun, and what happened next would change the Supreme Court forever. Before we dive deeper into this stunning confrontation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more explosive political revelations that the mainstream media won't show you. Pam Bondi hadn't planned to be at the center of this firestorm. The former Florida Attorney General had built her career on prosecutorial toughness and conservative principles. After serving as Florida's first female Attorney General from 2011 to 2019, she had transitioned to private practice while maintaining connections with influential conservative circles. Known for her direct approach and unflinching commitment to transparency in government, Bondi had received a mysterious envelope 3 weeks earlier. The package, delivered without a return address to her office, contained documents that appeared to outline a previously undisclosed arrangement regarding Justice Barrett's 2020 confirmation process. Amy Coney Barrett, the Supreme Court's youngest justice, had risen to her position through an impressive legal career. A former Notre Dame law professor and judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, Barrett had been confirmed to the Supreme Court in October 2020, following the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her strict constructionist judicial philosophy and religious convictions had made her both a conservative icon and a lightning rod for progressive criticism. The Judiciary Oversight hearing had been scheduled as a routine examination of recent Supreme Court decisions, with Barrett appearing voluntarily as part of the court's outreach to maintain good relations with Congress. Neither she nor the committee members expected anything out of the ordinary. Bondi had spent days verifying the documents, consulting with legal experts and former colleagues in government ethics offices. "This isn't about politics," she had told her inner circle. "If what I've found is authentic, the American people deserve to know before any more major decisions are handed down." The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Bondi's allegations proved true, they could potentially force a recusal or even impeachment proceedings against a sitting Supreme Court justice. If proven false, Bondi's credibility would be shattered, and she could face legal consequences for defaming a Supreme Court justice. The tension in the hearing room reflected this gravity. Democratic senators whispered urgently to their aides, while their Republican counterparts maintained poker faces, unsure whether to defend Barrett or distance themselves from potential scandal. Justice Barrett herself maintained her composure, though those closest to her noticed her right hand gripping the edge of the table with unusual force. For the American public watching the live stream, this wasn't merely political theater. It was a moment that could fundamentally alter the balance of the highest court in the land at a time when several major constitutional cases hung in the balance. "The documents I've obtained," Bondi continued, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent chamber, "indicate that prior to Justice Barrett's confirmation hearings, a private understanding was reached regarding how she would approach certain categories of cases. Senator Richard Blumenthal interrupted sharply. Ms. Bondi, these are extremely serious allegations. Can you be specific about the nature of this alleged arrangement? Bondi nodded, turning to the first document in her folder. This is an email exchange between two senior officials in the previous administration, dated September 18, 2020, 3 days before Barrett's nomination was officially announced. She placed the first document on the overhead projector, and the text appeared on screens throughout the hearing room. The email discussed a mutual understanding with ACB regarding how certain cases would be handled. Though carefully worded to avoid explicit details, the language strongly suggested that assurances had been sought about specific legal positions Barrett would take once confirmed. Justice Barrett leaned toward her microphone. These emails, if authentic, do not include me as a recipient, Ms. Bondi. I never participated in such discussions. Bondi acknowledged this with a nod. That's correct, Justice Barrett. You're not directly copied. However, the next document addresses that point. She placed a second page on the projector, a calendar entry showing a private meeting between Barrett and the officials mentioned in the email, scheduled for the day after the email exchange. The committee chairman intervened. Ms. Bondi, suggesting, impropriety based on a calendar entry is speculative at best. Supreme Court nominees routinely meet with administration officials during the confirmation process. I understand your skepticism, Mr. Chairman, Bondi replied calmly, which is why. The third document is the most significant. She paused, making eye contact with Justice Barrett before continuing. This is a memorandum summarizing the meeting, written by one participant and sent to 3 others in the administration. As the document appeared on screen, audible gasps echoed through the chamber. The memo outlined specific legal questions that would likely come before the court in the following term and summarized ACB's general perspectives on each issue. More concerningly, it referenced mutual commitments that ensure alignment on several controversial areas of law. Senator Josh Hawley, visibly troubled, turned to Barrett. Justice Barrett, I need to ask you directly. Did this meeting occur, as described in this memorandum? Barrett's response was measured but tense. Senator, I took dozens of meetings during the nomination process. I cannot recall the specific content of each, but I can state unequivocally that I never made commitments about how I would rule on future cases. That would violate judicial ethics. Bondi pressed further. Justice Barrett, please look at page Y3 of the memorandum, which specifically mentions your concerns about how these discussions might appear if made public. The room grew even more silent as Barrett reviewed the passage. The document claimed she had requested absolute confidentiality about certain aspects of the discussion, specifically because they went beyond the traditional bounds of nomination interviews. Senator Ted Cruz attempted to redirect the hearing. This entire presentation is based on unauthenticated documents from anonymous sources. In what world is this appropriate material for a congressional hearing? But Bondi was prepared for this objection. Senator Cruz, I understand your concern. That's why I've had these documents examined by 2 independent forensic analysts. She introduced affidavits from digital forensics experts who had verified the metadata and authentication markers of the electronic documents. Furthermore, Bondi continued, producing another document, I have a sworn statement from someone who was present at this meeting, someone who has only now come forward because of concerns about recent Supreme Court decisions that align precisely with the commitments outlined in these documents. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as Bondi named the witness, a former mid-level Justice Department official who had been taking notes during the meeting but had only recently realized the ethical implications of what had transpired. Justice Barrett, maintaining remarkable composure, requested a brief recess to review the materials with her counsel. The chairman, seeing Barrett's distress despite her professional demeanor, quickly granted the request. As Barrett and her legal team exited to a private room, cameras captured the strained expressions of committee members. No one had expected the oversight hearing to veer into territory that now threatened the legitimacy of the Supreme Court itself. During the recess, the hearing room erupted in frantic discussions. Democratic senators huddled with their staffers, while Republicans appeared divided, some preparing defenses of Barrett, others distancing themselves from what was unfolding. Constitutional scholars watching the proceedings began flooding social media with analyses of the potential ramifications. When Barrett returned 15 minutes later, the changed atmosphere was palpable. Her usual confidence had been replaced by a visible tension, and her legal counsel passed her a handwritten note as she took her seat. As the hearing resumed, Justice Barrett asked to address the committee before further questioning. The chairman nodded, and all eyes turned to the Supreme Court Justice. "I've had the opportunity to review Ms. Bondi's documents," Barrett began, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I take these allegations extremely seriously, as they strike at the heart of judicial independence, and the oath I swore to uphold." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "The memorandum Ms. Bondi has presented contains discussions that I do not recognize or recall. However, rather than issue a blanket denial, I believe the integrity of the court requires a thorough investigation of these claims." The room remained silent, surprised by Barrett's measured response. Many had expected an emphatic denial, not this call for investigation. Bondi, sensing her moment, approached the crucial turning point. "Justice Barrett, I appreciate your willingness to consider these documents. However, there's one more piece of evidence that I believe will clarify matters considerably." She removed a final document from her folder, one she had deliberately held back until this moment. "This is a handwritten note that the whistleblower states was written by you during the meeting in question." Bondi placed it on the projector, and Barrett's distinctive handwriting appeared on screens throughout the room. The note contained abbreviated points about several legal doctrines, with asterisks next to specific items, including the phrase, "maintain conf," on points 1 to 3. Barrett studied the document, her expression changing subtly as she recognized her own handwriting. The room held its breath, waiting for her response. What happened next stunned everyone present. "The handwriting appears to be mine," Barrett acknowledged, "but this note has been presented without context. May I approach to examine the original?" After receiving permission, Barrett stood and walked to Bondi's table, examining the paper carefully. As she held it under the light, she gestured for her counsel to join her. They whispered briefly, and then Barrett returned to her seat, a new certainty in her expression. "Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ms. Bondi," Barrett began, her voice now stronger. "I recognize this document, but not in the context that's been implied. This appears to be a page from my personal preparation notes before my confirmation hearings." Barrett reached into her own portfolio and removed several similar pages of notes. "I kept extensive preparation materials during the confirmation process, as any nominee would. The phrases highlighted by Ms. Bondi refer not to secret agreements, but to confidential client matters from my prior legal work that I knew I couldn't discuss during hearings due to attorney-client privilege." She passed her notes to the committee clerk. "You'll see the same abbreviations and marking system throughout my preparation materials. The confiarch notation refers to confidentiality, not confirmation, as has been suggested." Barrett then addressed the memorandum directly. "As for the meeting summary Ms. Bondi presented, I cannot explain its origins, but I can state unequivocally that it mischaracterizes any conversations I had during the nomination process. I would never make commitments on future cases. That would violate the judicial oath I've honored throughout my career." The momentum in the room suddenly shifted. Bondi, who had appeared in complete control moments earlier, now struggled to maintain her narrative. "Justice Barrett, These explanations seem convenient, Bondi countered. The whistleblower's testimony, Barrett interrupted, something she rarely did. Ms. Bondi, you mentioned a whistleblower who took notes during this alleged meeting. Make. I ask if those original notes have been produced? Bondi hesitated. The whistleblower provided their recollection, which formed the basis of the memorandum. Barrett nodded. So there are no contemporaneous notes from this person? Only a memorandum created recently, based on 2-year-old memories? The memorandum was created by administration officials immediately after the meeting, Bondi insisted. Then why does its metadata, which your own experts verified, show it was created last month? Barrett asked, revealing that her legal team had quickly examined the document properties during the recess. The room erupted in murmurs as Bondi appeared genuinely surprised by this revelation. Clearly, she hadn't expected Barrett to challenge the technical aspects of the evidence. Senator Ted Cruz seized the opening. Ms. Bondi, are you suggesting that a document created last month accurately reflects a meeting from 2020 without contemporaneous notes or recordings? Before Bondi could respond, Barrett delivered the final blow. Mr. Chairman, during the recess, my staff made inquiries about the alleged meeting date. I was not in Washington, D.C. on the date specified in these documents. I was giving a lecture at Notre Dame Law School, which was recorded and attended by hundreds of people. She produced travel records and the lecture schedule as verification. Furthermore, the 2 officials I supposedly met with were both traveling on that date as well, one in Florida and one in Texas, according to their public schedules. The room fell completely silent as the implications became clear. The documents, despite their convincing appearance, contained a critical factual error that undermined their entire premise. Bondi stood frozen at the podium, visibly processing this information. Her carefully constructed case was collapsing in real time before a national audience. Barrett spoke into the silence, her tone not triumphant but somber. I understand that the Supreme Court's work is controversial and people of good faith can disagree with our decisions. But allegations of secret deals and ethical breaches require extraordinary evidence that respects facts and context. The chairman, recognizing the moment had shifted decisively, intervened. Ms. Bondi, do you have a response to Justice Barrett's points about the document creation date and the meeting's physical impossibility? Bondi, her confidence visibly shaken, admitted, I received these documents in good faith and had them verified for authenticity. If there are discrepancies in the timeline, they need to be investigated further. I stand by my concern about judicial independence, but I acknowledge that Justice Barrett has raised legitimate questions about this specific evidence. It was as close to a concession as the moment would produce. The triumph was clear, not through hostile confrontation, but through Barrett's methodical dismantling of the allegations with verifiable facts and context. The hearing concluded an hour later, but the aftermath was just beginning. As Barrett exited the committee room, surrounded by Capitol Police providing additional security, the hallways buzzed with congressional staffers and journalists trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. Within minutes, Shirk Barrett documents and Bondi allegations were trending nationwide. News networks interrupted regular programming to analyze the dramatic confrontation, with legal experts weighing in on the significance of the allegations and Barrett's response. Conservative media outlets quickly framed the incident as an attempted character assassination of a respected jurist. Documents debunked. Justice Barrett exposes false allegations, read the headline on one major right-leaning site, complete with footage of Barrett methodically dismantling Bondi's evidence. Progressive outlets took a more nuanced approach. Barrett refutes controversial documents. Questions remain about court independence, captured their perspective, acknowledging the specific evidence had been challenged while maintaining broader concerns about the Supreme Court's direction. The mysterious whistleblower who had provided documents to Bondi remained anonymous, but speculation ran rampant. Some suggested it was a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge, while others wondered if the entire episode had been an elaborate setup to discredit legitimate oversight of the court. By evening, 3 significant developments had occurred. First, the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman and ranking member released a rare bipartisan statement announcing an investigation into the source of the documents presented at the hearing. While we may disagree on judicial philosophy, we are united in condemning the use of apparently falsified documents in congressional proceedings, the statement read. Second, forensic analysts from the FBI were reportedly examining the documents to determine their true origins, particularly focusing on when and how they were created and whether they represented authentic templates that had been recently modified. Third, several legal ethics experts published a joint analysis of the incident, noting that regardless of this specific allegation's veracity, the episode highlighted deeper concerns about Supreme Court confirmation processes and the lack of binding ethics rules for the nation's highest court. Justice Barrett, who had maintained remarkable composure throughout the ordeal, issued a brief statement through the Supreme Court's Public Information Office. I appreciate the committee's willingness to hear all perspectives. The work of the court continues, guided by the Constitution and the rule of law. Pam Bondi, facing significant backlash and potential professional consequences, appeared on a friendly cable news program that evening to defend her actions. I presented evidence that was provided to me by what I believed was a credible source, she explained. If some of that evidence has been called into question, that doesn't erase the broader concerns about judicial independence that many Americans share, the host pressed her. But do you regret not verifying the basic timeline before making such serious allegations against a Supreme Court justice? Bondi's hesitation spoke volumes. I believe I did due diligence with the information available to me. If I made a mistake in that process, I'll accept responsibility. But I won't apologize for asking difficult questions about our institutions. The political fallout extended beyond just Bondi and Barrett. Several senators who had enthusiastically amplified Bondi's allegations before they were refuted now faced their own credibility questions. Meanwhile, those who had defended Barrett from the beginning claimed vindication. Constitutional scholars noted that regardless of this specific incident's outcome, it revealed something important about the precarious state of public trust in American institutions. One prominent law professor observed, when allegations this explosive seem plausible to millions of Americans, regardless of their ultimate veracity, it signals a crisis of confidence in the Supreme Court that should concern everyone. A week after the hearing, investigative journalists identified significant discrepancies in the whistleblower's background, raising serious questions about their credibility and motives. The person had apparently never worked in the positions they claimed, though they had managed to obtain enough insider information to create convincing-looking documents. The most lasting consequence, however, came through an unexpected channel. 2 weeks after the hearing, the Supreme Court announced new transparency measures regarding justices' meetings during the confirmation process. While not directly acknowledging the Bondi incident, the new procedures required documentation of substantive pre-confirmation meetings and clearer disclosure of potential conflicts of interest. In a rare interview, a senior Supreme Court justice not involved in the controversy admitted, while the specific allegations proved unfounded, they highlighted legitimate concerns about the court's transparency. Sometimes it takes a crisis, even one based on false premises, to drive necessary institutional change. For the American public, the dramatic confrontation between Bondi and Barrett served as yet another example of how difficult it had become to separate fact from fiction in the political arena. Yet, paradoxically, the incident ultimately reinforced the importance of evidence, context, and methodical verification in an era of instant allegations and viral outrage. 6 months later, when Justice Barrett wrote the majority opinion in a landmark case that contradicted what the falsified documents had claimed she would do, many saw it as the final vindication of her judicial independence. Others, however, wondered if the public scrutiny had influenced her decision-making in ways no one could measure. The lesson was clear. In America's charged political environment, accusations could travel around the world before the truth had. Time to put on its shoes, but facts, presented clearly and methodically, still had the power to prevail. Thank you for watching this detailed breakdown of the Barrett-Bondi confrontation. If you found this analysis informative, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of political showdowns that the mainstream media often misrepresents. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos and share your thoughts in the comments below.